there is a document. It is classified. It was written by the National Intelligence Council, the body that represents the collective judgment of all 18 United States intelligence agencies. It was completed sometime around February 26, 1 week before the first bombs fell on Tehran. That document asks a simple question. If the United States launches a large-scale military assault on Iran, can it topple the regime? The answer is one word: no. That document was finished before the war started. The war started anyway. And today, March 7, 2026, we know it exists. 14. The Washington Post, citing 3 people familiar with the report's contents, confirmed that a classified report by the National Intelligence Council found that even a large-scale assault on Iran would be unlikely to oust the Islamic Republic's entrenched military and clerical establishment. In the next 30 minutes, I'm going to walk you through what that report says, what the markets are screaming, what Congress just failed to do, what the administration's shifting justifications reveal, and what all of it means for your money, your security, and the next decade of American power. Every claim sourced, every number is verified. Let's go. Welcome to Daily Brief. Subscribe right now, because this story is producing new intelligence leaks, new market shocks, and new political fractures every single day. You do not want to be the last to understand what is happening. Let's rewind to February 28, 2026, because this did not start where most people think. 3. On February 26, Israel and the United States began joint air attacks on Iran, starting a war aimed at destroying Iran's missile program and bringing about regime change. 3. That same day, Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, was assassinated. 3. At exactly 2:30 a.m. EST, Donald Trump released an 8-minute video statement on Truth Social, saying that the purpose of the U.S. strikes was effectively regime change. But here is the part most Americans never fully absorbed. Days later, on the Senate floor, Senator Tim Kaine, a member of both the Armed Services and Foreign Relations Committees, stood and made an extraordinary claim. 33 Kaine said acts of war need congressional approval, arguing we can't afford to hide under a desk and let any president, Democrat or Republican, send our best and brightest, our own kids, into war to risk their lives unless we have debated it. 31 Kaine stated that Trump has unilaterally launched strikes at Iran without congressional authorization, failed to articulate a clear strategy, and callously said he doesn't have the yips about boots on the ground. Stop. Read that again. The President of the United States told the American public he does not have the yips about sending ground troops into a country of 90 million people. In a war his own intelligence community says cannot achieve its stated goal through military force. And then came the congressional response. 33 The Senate on Wednesday, March 4th, rejected a Democratic-led Iran War Powers resolution. The procedural vote failed by a vote of 47 to 53. 33 Senator Rand Paul was the only Republican to vote in favor. Senator John Fetterman was the only Democrat to vote against. 38 The House also rejected the measure 222 to 219, largely along party lines. Congress had the chance to reassert its constitutional authority. Both chambers said no. The war continues without authorization. But here is what most coverage is missing. The strikes on February 28 were not the cause, they were the match. The fuel had been building for months. 3. After the Middle Eastern crisis began in 2023, Israel and Iran exchanged missile strikes in 2024 and again during their 12-day war in June 2025, which also saw a U.S. airstrike on Iran's nuclear facilities. That conflict was supposed to settle things. It did not. 3. In January 2026, Iranian security forces killed thousands of protesters during the largest protest since the Islamic Revolution. 24 Prior to the conflict, Iran's economy was strained by sanctions, protests, and a depreciating rial, with inflation exceeding 40% in 2025. The regime was already cracking from within. The Iranian people were doing the dangerous, courageous work of challenging their own government. And then, rather than supporting that process, the United States began its largest military buildup in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. 3 Iran and the US held indirect nuclear negotiations in February, while the US undertook that build-up. The negotiations were never serious. The military options were never serious. The military option was always the destination. Diplomacy was in the waiting room. If you're finding this useful, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. This story is producing new developments every single day. Now let's look at the receipts. We do evidence here at Daily Brief. Not rage, not speculation. Evidence. Receipt number 1, the Classified Intelligence Report. 14. The findings, confirmed to the Washington Post by 3 people familiar with the report's contents, raised doubts about President Trump's declared plan to clean out Iran's leadership structure. The report, completed about a week before the war on February 28, outlined succession scenarios stemming from either a narrowly tailored campaign or a broader assault. 14. In both cases, the intelligence concluded that Iran's clerical and military establishment would respond to the killing of Khamenei by following protocols designed to preserve continuity of power. 14. The prospect of Iran's fragmented opposition taking control was described as unlikely. 14. The White House did not say if the president was briefed on this assessment before approving the military operation. Let me translate that. America's own intelligence apparatus looked at this war and said, it will not achieve its goal. The regime will survive, and the White House will not confirm the president even read the assessment before launching it. 14. Holiday Grays, a senior fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, said, bending the knee to Trump would go against everything they stand for. 19. Suzanne Maloney of the Brookings Institution added, there's no other force within Iran that can confront the remaining power that the regime has. The intelligence says no. The experts say no. The experts say no. The experts say no. That is not a strategy. That is momentum with a military budget. Receipt number 2, the market verdict. Markets do not have political opinions. They calculate risk. Here is what they calculated this week. 27 oil prices surpassed $90 a barrel Friday, with American crude settling at $90.90, up 36% from a week ago, and Brent climbing 27% to $92.69.69. According to PBS reporting on March 7, 2026, this 36% weekly surge for U.S. crude is the biggest since WTI futures began trading in 1983, the biggest weekly oil price increase in 43 years, ever. 27. Claudio Galimberti, chief economist at Rystad Energy, said, we keep seeing news of vessels being hit or refineries or pipelines, so the list is very long. As a result, roughly 9 million barrels of oil per day are off the market. 30. Retail gasoline prices in the U.S. have jumped nearly 27 cents to $3.25 per gallon on average, according to AAA. The last time gas prices made a similar jump was in March 2022 after Russia invaded Ukraine. 24. South Korea's Kospi index suffered its biggest crash since the 2008 financial crisis, dropping up to 12% in a single day on March 4th, triggering a circuit breaker. South Korea, an American ally, not a combatant. Its market crashed because of what America started. 26. According to Goldman Sachs's head of oil research, Don Struven, speaking on March 2nd, the current price point reveals what traders are betting on, a disruption lasting about 4 weeks. 26. If the war and the effective closure of the Strait stretch beyond that expectation, the consequences could become dire. To generate substantial demand destruction, prices may have to rise into triple-digit territory, Struven noted. Oil up 36%, airlines hammered. Defense stocks surging, South Korea's worst day since 2008. The market voted. And it voted, this is not short. Receipt number 3, the congressional failure. 35. Senator Kaine said, if you don't have the guts to vote yes or no on a war vote, how dare you send our sons and daughters into war where they risk their lives? 35. Senate Minority Leader Schumer said, they have shifting goals, different goals all the time, different answers every day, and I am truly worried about mission creep. 32. The vote follows military actions which began without congressional authorization and have resulted in the death of 6 American service members. 53 senators voted to let the president continue a war the Constitution says only Congress can declare. The House voted 219 to 212 to do the same. The constitutional check failed in both chambers. That precedent is now established for this conflict. Receipt number 4. The escalation signals. 35 Defense Secretary Hexet said the operation is just getting started. He told reporters, "We are accelerating, not decelerating." Iran's capabilities are evaporating by the hour, while American strength grows fiercer, smarter, and utterly dominant. More bombers and more fighters are arriving just today. 4 Trump posted on Truth Social, "There can be no deal with Iran except UN conditional surrender." 6 On March 7th, Trump warned Iran would be hit very hard, adding that the US may expand its target list to new areas and groups of people. 16 Trump has also privately expressed interest in deploying ground forces, according to NBC News. The stated goal is regime change. The intelligence says it cannot work through bombing. The rhetoric is escalating daily, and ground troops are now being discussed privately. That is receipt 4. Drop your reaction in the comments. Did any of this come through in the coverage you watched this week? Now let's talk about psychology. This is the part that almost never gets covered. The dominant operating framework inside this White House is escalation dominance, the belief that every adversary has a breaking point. Hit hard enough, fast enough, publicly enough, and they fold. It is the approach of a negotiator who believes every deal is won by the person willing to walk away last. It explains the demand for unconditional surrender. It explains the refusal to define an endpoint. It explains why every question about how this ends gets answered with "we are just getting started." The pattern is documented. Tariffs escalated on allies and adversaries. Doggies slashed agencies. Immigration enforcement expanded. The consistent theory has been pressure works, backing down is weakness. And domestically, it has often worked, because opponents eventually gave in. But Iran is not a domestic opponent. Iran is a nation of 90 million people with a regime that has survived 47 years of external pressure, an 8-year war with Iraq, and decades of sanctions. 14 As Degras noted, the upper echelons of the clerical establishment are ideological, and so their modus operandi is to resist American imperialism. The tragedy, the real generational tragedy, is that this did not have to happen this way. 14 Iran's security forces killed thousands of protesters during demonstrations in January, fueled by the country's abysmal economy. The regime was fracturing from within. All the United States had to do was support that process strategically. Instead, the bombs fell, and a crowd of thousands gathered in Tehran after Friday prayers to decry the US-Israeli campaign. While those who attend prayers are usually religious hardliners, it shows the government is still able to mobilize large crowds. External attack unifies a population against the attacker. That is one of the most documented phenomena in political science. It is happening exactly as predicted. And then there is Russia. Russia is providing Iran with intelligence about the locations and movements of American troops, ships, and aircraft, according to multiple sources. The first indication that Moscow has sought to get involved in the war. The war has caused a significant increase in demand for Russian energy products, the Kremlin said. Moscow did not fire a single bullet. It just waited. Higher oil prices funding its war chest. Distracted American military. Intelligence flowing to Tehran. Putin's strategic objectives, advanced by his adversary's own decisions. Now let's bring this to your front door, because this is not happening in marble chambers. It is happening in your bank account. Your gas prices. 24 The conflict disrupted approximately 20% of global oil supplies transiting the Strait of Hormuz. Oil settled at $90.90 on Friday, up 36% in a single week. 25 Diesel prices doubled in Europe, and jet fuel prices rose by close to 200% in Asia, according to Rystad Energy. Every truck delivering food to your grocery store runs on diesel. Everything that moves costs more. Your investments. 22 Morgan Stanley warned that prolonged conflict with Iran could lead to higher oil prices, hotter inflation, and greater market uncertainty. South Korea's market crashed 12%. European and Asian indexes fell 1 to 2%. If you hold an index fund in a 401k, Your retirement savings declined this week because of a war 60% of the country did not support. Your mortgage, 22 oil prices may remain elevated if Iran remains under pressure. Geopolitical risk is becoming a persistent part of the backdrop, not merely episodic. Higher oil means higher inflation expectations. Higher inflation means the Fed holds rates. The Fed holding rates means your mortgage stays expensive or gets worse. That chain is already in motion, your job. 24 airspace closures across Gulf states led to over 4,000 daily flight cancellations. Dubai International Airport and Abu Dhabi sustained damage. Tourism in the UAE and Qatar suffered, with hotel bookings plummeting and economic hubs like Dubai facing paralysis. American companies that export to the Gulf, aerospace, agriculture, tech, are watching those markets freeze. Your security. For the war has killed more than 1,320 people according to state media, and the Trump administration warns it will soon escalate. 6 American service members are dead. Every munition fired at Iran is a munition not available for the next crisis. China is watching. North Korea is watching. The weapons cupboard gets thinner while the world stays dangerous. Now let's look forward. And I need you to stay with me because every scenario from here involves real choices with real consequences. Scenario 1, the spiral. The administration does what it has done every day this week, escalate. Trump said Saturday that Iran will be hit very hard and warned of an expanded target list. Hexet says they are accelerating. Trump demands unconditional surrender. Iran continues retaliating, hitting Gulf infrastructure, launching missiles at Israel, striking near Allied airports. Oil passes $100. Goldman Sachs has warned that is the recession trigger. Russia provides intelligence to Iran on American troop movements. The conflict widens. Ground troops enter the discussion. The spiral has no clean ending. It has only a flaw, and we do not yet know where it is. Scenario 2. The off-ramp. The economic pain becomes politically unbearable. Gas prices spike. Republican senators in competitive midterm races hear from angry constituents. Wall Street makes phone calls. 26 Goldman Sachs Struven noted that narrower military goals or the rise of a reformist leader in Iran could offer an off-ramp for a shorter conflict. The Pentagon declares tactical objectives met, the Navy destroyed, missile capacity degraded, and operations wind down. The strait reopens under Navy escort. Oil drops. Trump claims total victory. But even in this scenario, certain things are already irreversible. The supreme leader is dead. The Nick report is right. Succession protocols are activating, not collapsing. Gulf allies have absorbed billions in damage. The biggest weekly oil surge in futures history has already happened. The architecture of disruption stays. At best, the hostility softens. My honest analytical read, clearly labeled as my assessment, is that the escalation path looks more likely right now. The rhetoric is accelerating. Intelligence says the goal is unachievable. The president is demanding unconditional surrender from a regime designed to survive. That combination tends to produce extended conflicts. But events have moved faster than anyone predicted this week, so I hold my scenarios loosely. Here is what I know with certainty. 1. 14 America's own intelligence community concluded that a large-scale assault would be unlikely to oust Iran's regime. That is not reversible with a Truth Social post. 2. Oil surged 36% this week, the biggest weekly increase in 43 years. That shock is already in supply chains, airline costs, shipping rates, and consumer prices. That is not reversible with a phone call. 3. 32. The war began without congressional authorization and has resulted in the death of 6 American service members. Both chambers voted to let it continue. The constitutional check failed. That precedent is structural. 4. At least 1,332 people have been reported killed in U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran since the launch of war on February 28. Those lives are not reversible by any mechanism. Remember that classified document, completed around February 21. The one that said regime change through military force is unlikely? That document is still correct. The regime is still standing. The succession protocols are functioning. The bombing continues. The president demands surrender. The The defense secretary says we are just getting started, and no one in Washington can answer the most basic question a citizen of a democracy has the right to ask: how does this end? America did not arrive at this moment because of what Iran did. It arrived here through a series of deliberate decisions: to launch strikes without congressional authorization, to pursue regime change against the explicit assessment of its own intelligence community, to demand unconditional surrender from a nation designed to survive exactly this pressure, and to do all of it while telling the public the operation has only just begun. That is not a strategy. That is momentum mistaken for purpose. I want to leave you with three questions. First, the historical question. Is this the week the post-Iraq consensus officially died? The understanding that America does not launch open-ended wars of choice without defined objectives and congressional authorization, is that principle now gone? Or is there still a mechanism inside Washington capable of pulling the brake? Second, the strategic question. If the intelligence community's classified assessment says regime change by bombing is unlikely, and the administration launched anyway, what does that tell you about the relationship between intelligence and power in this government? What does it mean for every future crisis where the president is handed a briefing that contradicts what he wants to do? Third, the personal question. Does this week change how you see the next decade? Does it change where you put your money? Does it change how much confidence you have that the people making these decisions understand the consequences for the world and for you? Answer below. I read every single comment. Everyone. If this video added something to your understanding, hit like. It takes 2 seconds and it tells the algorithm that serious, sourced analysis is worth spreading. Subscribe to Daily Brief if you have not already. Share this with someone who's watching the news but cannot quite get the full picture, because the full picture is what we do here, every time.